Today on the Big 3 and 30 NFL, we're getting a Super Bowl rematch week 1.
To open the season, a rematch of Super Bowl 60.
The Cowboys get a favorable schedule.
We are breaking down the 2026 Dallas Cowboys schedule.
And Malik Nabers has his second surgery.
It's always something, right, when it comes to injuries.
This is the Big 3 and 30 NFL, the three biggest stories in the NFL from our local experts at the Locked On Podcast Network. We bring you the real story, why it matters, what's next, who wins the big game, and more, all in 30 minutes. The Big 3 and 30 NFL starts now. Thank you for making the Big 3 and 30 your first listen of the day. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com and win $300 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins.
The Seahawks open the season with a Super Bowl rematch against the Patriots at Lumen Field. Corbin Smith with Locked On Seahawks previews the matchup.
It is schedule release day. We now know all 17 of Seattle's games, when they're going to be playing, what time they're going to be playing, all the toughest stretches, the soft landing spots, all the other perks and the not so perks that are going to be on this schedule. I'm going to be breaking it all down here on today's episode. Without further ado, let's get to it. Now for your lead story here on our Thursday edition of Locked On Seahawks. The long wait is over. The 2026 schedules for all 32 NFL teams officially being announced today. The Seattle Seahawks, the defending champions, set to open things up. As we talked about yesterday, there were reports on Wednesday. The Seahawks are playing the Patriots at Lumen Field on Wednesday night, September 9th, to open the season, a rematch of Super Bowl 60. The Patriots have to watch the Seahawks put the banner up into the rafters, and then they get to play the team that beat them in February. Certainly, that's got some revenge game to it for players like Drake May. The Seahawks hoping to hold serve and get off to a fast start as they begin their title defense. We now know the rest of the schedule, and early on, for the 12s that want to get a lot of opportunities to see the Seahawks play at home, you're going to get a lot of those early on in this schedule. Even though the Seahawks play on the road in week 2 and 3, they're playing the Cardinals and the Commanders on the road. 5 of the next 6 games, starting with a home afternoon matchup with Jim Harbaugh, Justin Herbert, and the Los Angeles Chargers. You've got 5 out of 6 games there at Lumen Field in a 6-week span. They're only going to be making one trip in a plane during that time, and that is a Thursday night battle against the Denver Broncos, the only Thursday night game the Seahawks have. They do have that Wednesday nighter to open the season. That won't be on short rest, though, so that is certainly going to be advantageous for Seattle. And they've also got their first matchup with the 49ers coming at Lumen Field in week 5. So you look at just those first 6 games, it is a 50-50 split. But beyond that point, the next 3 weeks going into the midway point of the season, Seattle's got primetime matchups at home against Kansas City and Chicago, then faces Arizona for the second time at home. So again, they get 5 out of 6 games in a 6-week span at Lumen Field. So they're going to get a lot of their 9 home games out of the way in the first couple months of the season. A large chunk of them, they're going to be playing a lot of games in Seattle, including a number of primetime games. And you look at the rest of the schedule and the way that this lines up for the Seahawks. Week 10, they go on the road to face Clint Kubiak, their former offensive coordinator, and the Raiders. Week 11 bye week, which I've always been a believer that as an NFL team, you want that bye week to be after you've played 6 or 7 games minimum. Seattle gets that this year. They get that week 11 bye, and then they come out of that bye, go to San Francisco to play the 49ers at Levi Stadium. This is where the schedule flips some. You are still going to see a handful of home games left on the schedule, but 3 of the final 4 games on the road at the Eagles, at the Panthers, and finishing up with the Rams. Maybe the most interesting thing that we saw on this schedule, the Rams, both games against them coming in the final 3 weeks. A lot of times it's not ideal to play the same team twice in a 3-week span, but we have seen the Seahawks do this against other NFC West foes over the years. There's nothing unfamiliar about it. We have also seen it with regular season and playoffs. The 49ers last year, they actually played 2 consecutive games against the San Francisco 49ers. That obviously will not happen in the regular season, but overall, this sets up to be a pretty nice schedule for the Seahawks. I think that the most notable thing, and we'll get deeper into the woods as this show goes on, at some of the big positives, the big advantages, and there's certainly some negatives in this schedule. There's no such thing as an NFL schedule that is perfect. There are some things that the Seahawks probably are wishing didn't happen on their schedule, but you're always going to have, especially when you have a first place schedule like the Seahawks have, playing first place teams from a year ago, you're going to be playing a lot of really good football teams. The biggest advantage is that early on, that soft landing spot. Again, I think you just look at those beginning games. You don't take anybody lightly in the NFL, but Arizona in week 2, I think the Cardinals have a real chance to get the number 1 pick this next year. I just don't expect them to win very many games. The Commanders are going to have Jaden Daniels back healthy. They made some changes in the offseason, but that's still one of the oldest rosters, even with what they've done this offseason in the NFL. I don't know if they're going to be closer to last year's team or the one that went to the NFC title game 2 years ago. They're kind of going to be one of the curiosities, so to speak, in the league, but still, they had a losing record last year. They struggled. They've got an older team. That is a game the Seahawks have to be feeling good about. And you get the Chargers, 49ers back-to-back weeks at home, and you've regained that home field advantage over the past year. The 12s really brought it last season. So you're looking at a stretch there where I think they can go 4-1 or even 5-0. I think they have an opportunity to get off to a very fast start to open the season. Of course, they could lose 2 or 3 of those games. This is the NFL. There is no such thing as a gimme, but I think that is a fairly soft landing spot for the Seahawks. And I think you also have to consider all the tough games they've got coming up after that. They continue to have home games. That is going to benefit them. I do think the back half of the schedule, that might be where things are the most murky for the Seattle Seahawks, just because I even look at the home games. Dallas and New York, I keep saying this, and maybe the Giants will prove me wrong on this. I just think New York has got a lot of exciting young talent, and playing them earlier in the season would have been advantageous. I wonder if playing them in the second half, when, John Harbaugh has had time to work with that roster, a lot of their young players have gained experience. I'm wondering if the Giants could be feeling kind of frisky at that point in terms of trying to battle for a wild card spot. That is not going to be an easy game. Those are your 2 home games opening that 6-game stretch, and then you get 3 out of 4 on the road after that. So that stretch of the schedule, you better hope that you played really good football the first 2/3 of the season, because you're going to have a lot of real tests. You're going to be on the road a lot more down the stretch. So I think that is maybe the most noteworthy thing that jumps out in terms of looking at the schedule, that, maybe in terms of what might be the hardest stretch. You could look at a couple different ones, and I'll examine these a little bit deeper as we get into the show. But those are the stretches. That is one of them that really jumps out to me in terms of being one where the Seahawks have a number of tough games, and playing the Rams twice in the final 3 weeks. You can't tell me there was not intentionality to that with the NFL. I know they say that this is, the schedules are randomly put together. There are hands in there manipulating things, though. There is no way that they did not do that on purpose just to get it set up. And you've got the first matchup coming on Christmas Day, a Friday game, and that one will be at Lumen Field. So Seahawks fans that are hoping to get a really nice present on Christmas Day with a Seahawks win, it's going to be a tough one to earn against the Rams coming back, looking to avenge the losses they had at Lumen Field last year. So those 2 teams, we don't get to see them play again until we get into late December, and then we get to see them twice in 3 weeks, and that could really decide the NFC West. It could decide the number 1 seed again. We'll see where things stand at that point, but that closing stretch is one that we're going to have to continue to look closer at, because I think that's the murkiest part of Seattle's schedule.
The playoffs are here, and it's the most electric time in basketball. On Kalshi, you can trade every single playoff game, every series, the conference finals, and even the championship. The Spurs are trading at just 18% to win it all. That means a $100 trade pays out $503 if they take the title. As the playoffs heat up, those numbers move in real time, and you can buy in or out anytime. On Kalshi, you're trading against peers in a live market, meaning there's no house, and as the probability changes, you can buy in and out of your position. For a limited time, download the Kalshi app and use code LOCKEDON to get $10 when you trade 10. KALSHI, Kalshi. Trade on anything. 18 plus only. Restrictions and eligibility requirements apply. Event contract trading involves risk and may not be suitable for all investors. Prices, values, and available markets may differ from those mentioned. For more information, see kalshi.com/regulatory.
Welcome back to the Big 3 and 30 NFL. The Cowboys' schedule has some tough names, but a late bye and early road trips have some breaks to go along with them. Marcus Mosher and Landon McCool with Locked On Cowboys lay everything out.
We are breaking down the 2026 Dallas Cowboys schedule. We've already known who they're going to play for the last several months. That's not a surprise. The only thing that we found out on Thursday was when and where, or when and what time these games will be played.
Yeah.
We're going to go through the schedule kind of game by game, but just what are your general thoughts, Landon, here on this schedule for the Cowboys?
I mean, I want to preface my comments by first saying that I still think this is a tough schedule because of all the reasons that we talked about when we broke down the teams that the Cowboys were playing. Because the information we got, like you mentioned, was who the Cowboys were playing and whether they were home or away games. And then on top of that, we also were aware that the Cowboys were playing one international game, right? So I think knowing all those elements, this was going to be a difficult schedule. However, the information that we learned today, to me, feels like almost best case scenario, to be honest, because of all the inputs that we have on the information of it, the arrangement of the way the situation went, I think is best case scenario. And I'll just quickly point out a couple different things really quickly. We knew that they were going to play Baltimore in Brazil in week 3. The concern that I think you and I both had was that the NFL was going to use this as a means to award the Cowboys the earliest possible bye week in the schedule, which is week 4, right? Which would be the following week. So that was a main fear.
And real quick, why is that such a big deal, having an early bye week? Because I know a lot of teams do not prefer it.
I think for me, these seasons are incredibly long. And when you add in the postseason of it all too, if you have those aspirations, I think having an early bye means that you end up playing something in the area of almost an entire regular season if you make it all the way through the playoffs without a break. And I just think that it's better for your football team to get an extra week later in the season as you gear up for the most difficult part of the season, which is the end. So having an early bye week to me is just not ideal. I will say that.
And the reason that you're saying that, assuming like the Cowboys make the playoffs, they're not the number 1 seed, you'd play 3 games to start the season, and then it would be 17 straight weeks of football without a break if you would happen to get to the Super Bowl. And that's just really hard to do. Now, are the Cowboys Super Bowl contenders? We can debate that. But I think the point stands, like, not having that break early in the year is, honestly, I think it's beneficial. You would like to have it in the second half of the year. But it's interesting, week 14, I don't ever remember the Cowboys having a bye week that late in the season. And we'll talk about this in a little bit, but they've got a bye week, and then they've got 4 games to end the season, and that's it.
It really is best case scenario in that specific sense. And I'll add up just 2 more things really quickly that really stuck out, is that you had one of the things that we were, not complaining about, but we were most leery about was the fact that they were going to have to play the NFC West, right? And it's obviously one of the toughest divisions, if not the toughest division in football. The Super Bowl champs are playing in that. The Rams obviously made it far in the playoffs as well. 2 of the best teams in football. And you get to play both of those 2 teams with extended weeks because of the fact that you play Philadelphia the week on Thanksgiving, the week before that you play Seattle on the following Sunday. You get 10 extra days, and then the Rams you get after the bye week, which is the game, which is the week after Seattle. So if you had told me that the Cowboys in the span of 4 weeks are having to play Philadelphia, Seattle, and the Rams in 3 of those 4 weeks, I would have been like, oh my gosh, that's a brutal stretch. if you had told me that it was arranged this particular way, I would have felt a whole lot better about it.
Yeah. A couple other things that we should point out. I always like to look at the potential bad weather games just because the Cowboys are not accustomed to playing it. Now, you and I have had the debate before, like we kind of wanted them to have more bad weather games so they could get used to playing in the elements and getting a little bit tougher. But I think you look at this schedule, there's really only 2 games where I think weather could be an issue, and that's the December 6th game against the Seahawks in Seattle. Now, it's a 4:25 Eastern start. And then in week 18 against Washington, that one could be some bad weather. But honestly, that's about it. In terms of weather, it's about as easy as it's going to get.
Yeah, honestly, I mean, you certainly have. I mean, you play in the NFC East, so you're playing teams that at the end of the year, especially that are going to have some potential bad weather if you go play them, depending on where it is.
You're playing the Giants in week 1, so you don't have to worry about it.
That's right, and the Philadelphia games are early enough that I mean you play a late November one, but it's not the same as playing them in early January or late December, where the weather really gets bad. So yeah, honestly, and again, you play Philadelphia at home in that game, so that doesn't.
It's October 26th is when they play in Philadelphia.
Oh, that's right. I'm sorry.
Yeah. So I mean, even then, I mean, it could be cold, it could be rainy, but the odds of it snowing or anything like that are pretty low.
Yeah, and again, it's in Dallas, so it's not even a concern. So yeah, you're just looking at the schedule, there's a lot of things. Look, it's going to be a tough schedule, and we're certainly going to talk about some of the tough parts of this schedule. But again, like they get so many gifts in this schedule by the placement of the bye, by the amount of days that they have in front of some of the tougher teams that they play. I just and early, just like the early schedule too, like the fact that you get. Yeah, they're 2 NFC East teams, but they're the 2 weakest NFC East teams that you're playing up front, and then you play 2 AFC games, and that kind of at least gives you a buffer to kind of get this offense and this team going in the early part of the season before you get into the meat of your schedule.
One more little scheduling quirk here that I wanted to mention. The Cowboys do play the Packers. It is a Sunday night football game in week 6. You knew the NFL was going to do everything possible to make sure it wasn't in the first 4 weeks of the season because the expectation is that Micah Parsons, likely to go in the PUP list, will be ready by week 5 at the very latest, it seems like. However, it's not a November or December game in Lambeau. And the other part of it is there's a chance that Micah's not 100% healthy. I think that's very realistic. He will be, I think, 11 months removed from the torn ACL. It could have been worse, is all I'm saying.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, the chances that he is completely healthy are extremely low. Yeah. Like, I mean, honestly, like it takes, I mean, what is it, 18 months to truly heal?
Really, to be back to yourself. Yes.
Yeah. So I mean, look, you're still playing Micah Parsons, and I'm not to take away from that at all, but I do think that he getting them early not only helps for the fact for travel and for also playing the game outside in Wisconsin, but it also helps, like you said, in kind of lining up the timelines for Parsons, but not only Parsons, but Tyler Kraft as well. Because
Tucker Kraft.
I'm sorry, I have the Tylers in my mind from that from the
Cowboys video.
Yeah. So I think. That's the other. I mean, I think he should be back at that point. But again, getting them early in the season, I think it just gets them when they're maybe still working their way back to full health. So maybe that team is not quite at full strength the way it would be later in the season.
2 more notes I wanted to mention. Like these are positives for the Cowboys. Giants, Commanders, as you mentioned at the top. You start out 2-0 in those games, and the Cowboys will be favored in both those games. I know on FanDuel right now they are 2.5-point road favorites against the Giants. If you can win both those games to start the season, you're just going to be sitting in a really good spot. And then at the end of the year, it's the exact same thing. It's Giants, Washington. So even if you happen to be, I'm trying to think, 8-7 going into the last 2 games, there's a way where you could win those final 2, get to 10-7, and have a bunch of tiebreakers go your way. That stretch is going to tell us a lot about the Cowboys, but also there's a stretch here: Cardinals, Colts, 49ers, Titans.
Yes.
I hesitate to always count the Cardinals as a win because if for my entire lifetime, the Cowboys have lost to the Cardinals, even when they've been the better team. But you would think that stretch, Cardinals, Colts, 49ers, Titans, you go 3-1 in that stretch, and you're going to be sitting really good kind of going into Thanksgiving weekend.
Yeah, and look, I gotta admit that I'm not fully up to speed on what the Daniel Jones timeline is.
He should be ready by that game, but it's a quarterback coming off a torn Achilles. It's always scary.
Close, and even if it's close, like that's dangerous for them.
Yeah.
So yeah, again, another situation where you kind of get a break in the timeline of guys coming back to full health and maybe facing a little bit of a weakened team.
The NBA playoffs are here, and every possession matters. If you're looking to get even closer to the action, FanDuel has a great offer to get you started. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if your first bet wins. That's right, turn $5 into $150 in bonus bets just for getting started. I like using FanDuel during the playoffs because everything I need is right there in one place. You can check stats, trends, and matchups before making your picks, which makes the whole experience feel a lot more informed. It's a really easy app to navigate, and it makes playoff basketball even more engaging from start to finish. Head to FanDuel.com to get started. FanDuel, play your game. If you've ever opened a bank account and thought, where did all my money go? You're not alone. Keeping track of subscriptions, spending, and bills can get overwhelming fast. That's where Rocket Money comes in, helping you take control of your finances all in one place. How does Rocket Money help you keep track of your finances? It tracks all of your subscriptions in one spot and can help cancel the ones you don't need with just a few taps. It automatically categorizes your spending so you can actually see where your money is going. And you can set budgets, get alerts, and stay on top of upcoming bills. It just makes everything feel more organized and gives you a clearer picture of your finances day to day. Rocket Money is a personal finance app that helps find and cancel unwanted subscriptions, monitors your spending, and helps lower your bills so you can grow your savings. Let Rocket Money help you reach your financial goals faster. Join at rocketmoney.com/lockedon. That's rocketmoney.com/lockedon.
Welcome back to the Big 3 in 30 NFL. The Giants are hoping Malik Nabers can be ready for Week 1 after a cleanup procedure on his injured knee. Patricia Traina with Locked On Giants sorts through the situation.
It's always something, right, when it comes to injuries. So word came out via The Athletic that Giants wide receiver Malik Nabers underwent weeks ago a second surgery on his knee. So I'll tell you what that's all about, how that might potentially affect his timeline, and just kind of, where everything stands with him as I know it. Now, things can obviously change, but I'll give you the most recent information that I have. Then in segment 2, speaking of Malik Nabers, if he's not ready, does this change anything regarding Odell Beckham Jr.? We'll talk about that. And I have some thoughts about the timing and some of that as well in segment 2. And then finally in segment 3, the NFL and the networks, they've released little drips and drabs of the 2026 regular season schedule. We know who the Giants will face in Week 1. We know whether or not they are going overseas. So we'll just talk about some of that, and I'll give you some other notes that I've gathered up regarding the schedule. We'll do that in segment 3. And of course, the schedule release program will be tomorrow night, Thursday night. We'll have a complete breakdown of the schedule. All right, let's get into the news of the day. So The Athletic reported that Giants wide receiver Malik Nabers had a second surgery on his right knee. Now, this was done weeks ago. We don't know how many weeks ago, but it was basically a cleanup of the knee. There was some scar tissue that was developing, and he went in and it was creating, it was creating some stiffness for him. So doctors had to go in, clean it out, and, get him back on the road to recovery. Now, according to the Athletics report, this second surgery should not create any kind of setbacks with regards to the schedule that Malik Nabers is on regarding, his rehab, which I'm saying, I don't buy, but I'll get to that in a moment. All right. So this cleanup that Malik Nabers had. Here's, as I understand it, Malik Nabers, when he was initially injured in week 4 of last season, he waited almost a month before he had ACL surgery. So I think he was injured. I want to say the last Sunday in September, and he didn't have his surgery until October 28th. So that was almost a month. I think maybe about a month in between the time he was injured and the time he had the surgery. The reason for that is because typically doctors wait until the swelling goes down in the knee before they go in there and they repair it. The problem, though, is that Malik didn't have strictly an ACL tear. He had other stuff that went on. His meniscus was messed up, and I think there was one other ligament in his knee that got messed up as part of the injury. So this was more of a complex type of injury that had to be repaired. Now, that all being said, typically it takes about a year before somebody coming off of an ACL is fully back to quote unquote normal, or what you and I know to be normal. So you can just imagine for an athlete, maybe an athlete needs a little bit longer because, they're running and they're cutting and they're pushing off on their ligaments. So it might take them a little bit longer. The added surgery that Malik Nabers had, and again, we don't know exactly when he had this cleanup, but here's what I can tell you. Every time doctors got to go into your body to do anything regarding surgery, don't tell me that's not going to set you back a little bit, all right? Because you're going to have swelling, you're going to have inflammation, you're going to have, irritation from, the procedure. It's going to add onto the recovery period. Now, some guys and gals will get over it quickly, some will not. This likely explains why every time Joe Shane was asked about Malik Nabers, he kept hedging. You've heard me say that on this program, that the Giants hedged every time the topic of Malik Nabers and, when he would be ready came up. Malik himself hedged by saying, when I'm ready, I'm ready. That right there, folks, should have been our first sign that this was going to probably take a little bit longer than, the average comeback. Now, Malik will make a full recovery. I mean, there's no question about that. The question is the timing that is involved. All right. So that being said, what are we potentially looking at here? Now, this is just me taking an educated guess based on, again, the information that I have. I have said now for several shows that I believe Malik Nabers is going to start training camp on the PUP list. I do not think he's going to be able to pass a physical when the training camp starts at the end of July. All right, that should not surprise anybody. I think what they're going to do with Malik is they're obviously going to be cautious with him. You don't want to put him out there and then, heaven forbid, there's a setback. And now you've got to start all over again. Malik, by the time we get to training camp, you're looking at, I want to say 10 months, I think he'll be removed from the injury. 10 or 11 months, I think it is. So they are going to ease him back, right? I don't know if he's been, able to run or do anything during the practices that they've had. We haven't been allowed in to see the veterans practice. They did have that voluntary mini camp before the draft. We weren't allowed to see it. We will be allowed in the building next Thursday for OTA number 3. I don't expect to see Malik Nabers doing much of anything. Now, obviously if we see him running, or even if it's just a jog, that's a positive sign. But I would be very surprised if we see him doing anything. I'd be surprised if they even let him out on the field while the practice is going on, because sometimes when a guy is rehabbing, they keep him inside for treatment and rehab on machines and whatnot inside the building. So that's going to be a big tell. But what I think is going to happen with Malik Nabers, what I think makes the most sense, the Giants will probably take the same path that they took with Andrew Thomas last year. Andrew Thomas, if you remember, when he was coming off of that season-ending foot injury, What the Giants did was they put him on PUP to start camp because he couldn't pass a physical. Then they took him off PUP, I want to say about a week and a half or so before the start of the regular season, or actually before the cut date. But he didn't really, they gradually ramped him up, because we talk about being in shape. You got to get into physical shape and you got to get into football shape. And the Giants used that time to, get him off of the PUP list so that he could practice and get him into shape. But even then, the whole idea there was, okay, he's off PUP. Now we can put him on the 53-man roster. We don't have to move him from active PUP to inactive PUP to start the season. That's what I think the Giants are looking to do with Malik. All right. They'll probably have him on the PUP list for the majority of camp, take him off at some point just before, like the last preseason week of the schedule, and then, be able to move him from training camp roster to the 53-man roster. But here's the other thing. I would be surprised if we see Malik Nabers for the first 2 or 3 games of the season. Again, keeping in mind the Andrew Thomas situation, and I get it was a different injury, a different player, a different everything, but I'm just basing it off of that because that seemed to work out well for the Giants. Andrew Thomas, if you remember, came off PUP, but did not play for the first 2 games of the regular season. They gave him extra time to get into football shape after missing most of training camp. By the time he played in the third regular season game, Andrew Thomas was on a pitch count. He only played, I think, 1/2 of that game, and I think that was against the Chiefs. By week 4, he was good to go. All restrictions lifted, green lighted, everything. I think the Giants will look to do the same thing with Malik Nabers, but I'm not so sure if it's going to be 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, or whatever. Now, here's something else to, talk about. I don't think it'll get to this, but we have to mention it. Could Malik start the season on the PUP list and then, gradually work his way back? I don't know that that's going to make a whole lot of sense. I think, you just carry him and he's inactive. And the reason why I say I don't think he'll land on the PUP list to start the season is if you're on the PUP list, you can't practice. Then you get your 21-day window where you can go back and you can practice and round yourself into shape. And then, they make a decision on whether you're ready or not. I don't think the Giants will do that. I mean, unless there is a setback that happens, I don't see them keeping Malik Nabers, off the practice field. He's going to have to eventually get back on the practice field, test out that knee, and just develop confidence in it all over again. So I think that's what's going to happen with Malik Nabers. But, as far as the report that, the second surgery, this cleanup is not expected to affect his rehab or his timeline, I don't buy that because, again, every time they go in and they got to do something, you're going to have post-operative swelling and scarring and all kinds of stuff that the body is going to need to heal. So that's my take on where things are with Malik Nabers. I think, when he does return, you probably won't see the Malik that, we saw pre-injury until the second half of this season. It could be that this season ends up being a washout for him. But, if we're being optimistic here, I would say maybe the second half of this season is when you're going to really see, Malik get back on the bicycle, so to speak, and look like the Malik of old. Just my guess, folks. I'm just going off of what information I have and what I have seen in the past. And again, I know everybody's different. I hope that, Malik bucks the trend and he's ready to go sooner. But I never got the impression, especially given how Joe Shane every time has hedged on whether Malik would be ready or not. I never got the impression that there was a whole lot of confidence that he would be ready in time. But here's the good news. The good news is we've got a lot of time. It's only May 14th. All right. We've got a lot of time before a decision has to be made. So a lot can happen over the next few weeks. as long as Malik keeps working at his rehab, which I know he's doing, and as long as, everything goes according to plan. So that is the big hope.
That's all for today's Big 3 in 30 NFL. If you follow basketball or college sports, the Big 3 in 30 has shows for the biggest news in the NBA and on campus going up every week just like this one. Just search the Big 3 in 30 NBA or the Big 3 in 30 College wherever you're listening or watching now. Thanks again for tuning in to the Big 3 in 30 NFL.